My phone buzzed again, and I hesitated before looking at the screen. The message was short, sharp, and infuriating. "Wynne's taking your spot." My parents. Of all people. After everything. I sank back into the leather chair by my window, letting the warm autumn sunlight spill across my apartment. My silk blouse felt impossibly soft against my skin, but it couldn't soften the sting of their words. I'd just spent $7,800 arranging the trip they'd dreamed about for years. Tickets, reservations, the works. Every detail meticulously planned, every corner accounted for. And yet, in one tiny, casual sentence, they made it clear I was already replaceable. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to reply, but something inside me whispered, "Not yet." Let them feel the weight of their words. I stared at the skyline, noticing the glint of morning light bouncing off the glass towers. I could smell my coffee, strong, bitter, grounding. The city hummed below, oblivious to my private chaos. I thought about Wynne, the name they had dropped like a bomb into my carefully constructed day. Who was she? And why, somehow, did she always seem to appear at the exact moment I thought I was secure? I tightened my grip on the mug. Hurt, yes. Angry, of course. But mostly resolute. This wasn't the first time I'd been sidelined, dismissed, or told I wasn't enough. And it wouldn't be the last. But I had changed. I wasn't the same girl who would have cried herself to sleep, begging for their approval. Not anymore. I remember the night like it was yesterday. I was 19, fresh out of college, full of hope and ideas, and I had been bubbling with excitement to share a plan with my parents. I wanted to help them finally take that dream trip to Europe, the one they'd talked about for years but never booked. I had saved every extra dollar from my part-time jobs, every tip from waitressing, every freelance paycheck. I had even learned to budget meticulously, tracking every cent in a small notebook I carried everywhere. When I told them, I was met with a mixture of irritation and disbelief. "Why are you wasting your money on us? Don't you have your own life to think about?" My father said, barely looking up from the evening news. My mother, scrolling through her phone, added without looking, "Besides, Wynne might want to go instead. She's so much more practical." The words felt like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my stomach dropped. I wanted to shout, to argue, to make them see how much this meant to me, not just the money but the thought, the love behind it. But I swallowed the lump in my throat, and my hands shook so badly I almost dropped the notebook. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the small gold locket my grandmother had given me before she passed. "Never let them decide your worth," she had whispered the day she gave it to me. "You decide it yourself." The warmth of that advice pulsed through me as I traced the initials inside the locket, feeling a spark of resolve. I couldn't stay small. I couldn't live by the rules of people who only saw what they wanted to see. By morning, I had made a decision. I would find a way to support my dreams, to invest in myself, and maybe, one day, prove to them that my worth wasn't defined by their approval. That day, a part of me left behind the girl who constantly sought validation and picked up the woman who would build her own path, quietly, determinately, and with her own money, her own vision. I didn't know it yet, but that locket, that piece of advice, and that sting of rejection would become the fuel for everything I would achieve. And somewhere deep inside, I knew I would return to that moment, not to plead, but to show them what I had built. After that pivotal night, I threw myself into building a life that no one could take from me. I started small, freelance graphic design for local businesses, long nights at my laptop, fueled by cold coffee and stubborn determination. At first, the clients were few, the pay meager, and the work exhausting. I would stay up past midnight, editing logos, designing websites, and sending invoices, all while imagining the freedom I would one day claim. It wasn't glamorous. I often worked from my tiny studio apartment, the walls lined with thrifted books and framed photos of the few friends who believed in me. But gradually, the pieces started to fall into place. A boutique clothing brand hired me for a full campaign, then a tech startup followed, and soon I had more clients than I could handle. Each small victory felt like a secret triumph. I didn't post every success on social media, My parents didn't need to see me thriving before they had doubted me. I kept the details to myself, sharing only modest updates when pressed. I also found a mentor, Claire, a seasoned designer who ran her own boutique agency. She believed in me in a way that my parents never had. "You don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary," she said during our first meeting. Her encouragement was like sunlight cutting through years of shadow, pushing me to trust my instincts, take risks, and refine my skills. Claire taught me that success wasn't just about talent. It was about strategy, perseverance, and knowing your worth. The path was far from easy. There were nights I cried into my laptop, questioning every choice, wondering if I'd ever break free from the weight of expectations. There were moments when rejection stung more sharply than any criticism, but each time I reminded myself of the locket, my grandmother's voice echoing, "You decide your worth." Slowly, confidence replaced doubt, and with it, a quiet, unshakable pride. Financial independence came in layers. My first $1,000 payout felt monumental. Then $5,000. Then $10,000. Every check was a reminder that I was no longer relying on anyone else to define my life. I invested carefully, learned to manage my finances, and eventually saved enough to fund my own big decisions, like that $7,800 trip I planned for my parents years later. I kept it quiet, even for my closest friends. It wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming power in a way only I could control. By the time I was 30, I had a thriving design business, a growing investment portfolio, and the kind of independence I had once only dreamed of. I was no longer the girl who waited for approval, the one whose ideas were dismissed or replaced. I was a woman who created her own reality, quietly, meticulously, and on her own terms. And though the past still lingered, I carried it like armor rather than a chain, ready to face the people who had once told me I wasn't enough. The doorbell rang just as I was straightening a framed piece of abstract art on my office wall. I knew exactly who it would be. My parents, of course, expecting to see the same dependent, uncertain girl they'd criticized years ago. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door with the casual confidence I had cultivated over a decade of hard work. "Hi, honey," my mother said, her voice light but tinged with surprise. "We thought we'd drop by to, check on you. Make sure you're doing okay." My father followed, a faint smirk hiding a flicker of uncertainty. I could see it in their eyes, the same doubt, the same assumptions that had driven me to prove myself in the first place. I stepped aside and motioned for them to enter. "Come on in. Let me show you something," I said, my voice steady, warm, but carrying an undercurrent of control. They paused, taking in the room. It wasn't ostentatious, but it spoke of success. Sleek furniture, commissioned artwork, awards lining the shelves, and certificates of achievement I'd earned but never broadcasted. My MacBook sat open on the desk with client emails piling up, evidence of the thriving business I had built from nothing. The faint scent of fresh coffee mingled with vanilla candles, the room curated with the quiet confidence of someone who knew their worth. My mother's jaw tightened. This looks different," she murmured. "Different." That was one word for it. I smiled, letting them absorb it, letting the silence stretch long enough to make the tension palpable. Finally, I spoke. "Do you remember the trip you wanted to take to Italy? The one I said I'd help fund?" Their eyes flickered with recognition. "I planned it. I saved for it. I booked it, all $7,800 of it. And Wynne." I let a pause hang in the air, letting them imagine the disappointment they expected to see in me. "She isn't taking my spot. You never were in my spot to begin with. I am the one who created it." My father blinked, the smirk faltering. My mother's hand went to her mouth, eyes wide. You did this yourself?" my father finally asked, voice small. "You."
"Yes, me."
"Every bit of it," I said, letting the pride in my voice be unmistakable. "All the opportunities I've had, every step I've taken, every challenge I've faced, I did it. I'm not waiting for permission. I'm not waiting to be chosen. I am living on my own terms." They looked around again, this time more carefully. The room was a testament to years of quiet perseverance. Awards I'd won, letters from satisfied clients, photographs from trips I had taken on my own. Even the locket my grandmother had given me rested on the desk, catching the sunlight, a silent witness to the woman I had become. I saw disbelief, guilt, and awe swirl in their expressions. And finally, a flicker of something I hadn't expected: respect. Not for me as their child, but for me as a woman who refused to be invisible. "Wow," my mother whispered. My father nodded slowly, unable or unwilling to speak. And in that moment, I knew the balance had shifted. They had underestimated me for years, but now they were forced to see the truth. I had built everything with my own hands, my own determination, and no one could ever take that away. I let the silence linger just a little longer, savoring the moment. They were no longer the judges of my worth. They were merely witnesses. I leaned against my desk, crossing my arms, feeling the quiet authority I had earned over years of struggle. "I'm happy to help with the trip," I said finally, but on my terms. Their eyes widened, a mix of relief and confusion. "First," I continued, "I want honesty. No more assumptions that someone else deserves my efforts more than I do. If you want my support, it comes with respect, not entitlement." My mother nodded, tentative but attentive. My father's brow furrowed, and I pressed on. "Second, I want you both to start taking your own steps. Pursue your dreams, make your plans, and fund them yourselves when you can. I will help guide you, not carry you. This is your chance to be independent, just like I had to be." I could see them absorbing it, the weight of reality settling in. "Third," I added, softening my tone, "I want you to understand boundaries. No more dismissive texts, no more replacing me in your minds with someone else. Wynne isn't your competitor. I am. And I am clear about my limits." I could feel the shift in energy, the old power dynamic dissolving. For so long, I had been the one shrinking, compromising, bending to their expectations. Now, the roles were reversed. I was calm, firm, and compassionate, but unyielding. "Lastly," I said, my voice gentle but unwavering, "I want you to see that I care. I want our relationship to grow, but only if it's built on honesty, mutual respect, and accountability. I've given you every chance to see me for who I am, not who you think I should be. This is the path forward." They exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. I saw shame, acknowledgement, and finally, a tentative acceptance. They were realizing that love without respect is hollow, that the support I offered was not a blank check, and that their past actions had consequences they could no longer ignore. And yet, beneath it all, I felt a quiet compassion. These were my parents, the people who had shaped my earliest understanding of the world, for better or worse. But I had grown beyond the fear of their judgment. My power was not just in what I had achieved, but in the clarity of my boundaries, the self-respect I refused to compromise, and the generosity I chose to extend on my own terms. By the time they left that evening, there was a fragile new equilibrium. They had learned, or at least glimpsed, that I was no longer the girl who could be sidelined, dismissed, or replaced. I had built a life that could not be shaken, and I was finally free to dictate the rules, not for anyone else, but for myself. Days turned into weeks after that confrontation, and slowly, I began to notice changes. My parents started making small but meaningful efforts, booking trips on their own, checking in with honesty instead of expectation, and occasionally calling just to ask for advice rather than approval. The shift was subtle, but it was there. They were learning to respect my independence, just as I had learned to respect my own strength. I often found myself sitting at my desk, tracing the chain of my grandmother's locket with my fingers, letting its gold warmth remind me of how far I had come. That piece of jewelry, once a symbol of hope and courage in a scared young woman's hands, had become a quiet anchor for the woman I had become, resilient, determined, and unapologetically self-sufficient. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that every late night, every challenge, every moment of doubt had been worth it. I was no longer defined by my parents' expectations or the fear of being replaced. I had created a life built entirely on my own terms, a life where my contributions were recognized, my efforts valued, and my dreams pursued without compromise. And yet, there was a softness in my reflection, too. I had compassion for them, for their flaws, for the habits that once hurt me. I understood that love is complicated, and sometimes the people we care about most need time to see us fully. My power wasn't about punishing them. It was about reclaiming my voice, my worth, and my ability to choose the terms of my relationships. I glanced around my apartment, the sun casting a golden glow across the shelves lined with awards, travel photos, and personal mementos. I smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with their approval and everything to do with the life I had built. I had proved, above all, that no one, not even my own parents, could dictate my value. And as I picked up my phone to send a message confirming their upcoming flight, I typed one final note in my mind, one that summed up everything I had learned. I will never let anyone take my spot, because I am the one who decides where I belong.